On September 11, 1980, a young Fort Wayne woman living in Dallas, Texas, was murdered. Her name is Barbara Hoppe. Barbara, unfortunately, was one of only many victims of murder and violent crimes in our country. This program is dedicated to Barbara Hoppe and her memory and to her family, who have been so kind and generous in their cooperation with us to make this program possible. Joining us on our topic, Our Victims People 2, Part 2, all the way from Dallas, Texas, Mr. Harmon Sheps. Mr. Sheps, welcome to Theater for Ideas. Mr. Sheps has offered a $10,000 reward for information leading to the conviction of the two killers of Barbara Hoppe. Mr. Sheps, again, welcome, and why don't we begin with what prompted you to make such an unusual offer? And is this typical? I mean, have you done this before, or?
First thing I'd like to say, I appreciate being invited to be here. The reason we advertised and offered a reward, I might explain it best by the words of some great Englishman who said, "All that is necessary for the triumph of evil is that all good people do nothing." I don't want to be one of those good people who do nothing. There's too many spectators in America and not enough people willing to fight these things away.
Well, we have a feeling, so many of us, as we read about these horrible crimes, well, there's nothing I can do about it. That's a shame. It's terrible, but there's nothing I can do about it. I think you're an example that each of us in our own way can do something about it. Is this the first time in Barbara's case that you offered a reward, or have you done this in the past?
No, we've been doing it on a continuing basis since 1973, when one of our own employees was shot by two armed robbers. After that, we decided to not only advertise rewards for people that might be harmed in our stores or in our business, but also any other case that involved a heinous crime and one that got us mad and excited. In this case, the Barbara Hoppe case certainly did.
Okay, so you offered a reward in the case of your employees. What happened? Were those people apprehended? Did your reward help get them captured?
In a very short time, I'd say it was 36, 48 hours, we had the name of one of the culprits. And this shows the weakness in our judicial or our system of justice. They knew who he was, could not arrest him because they did not have a statement, signed statement by somebody that accused him. And this is certainly isn't the way I see law enforcement ought to be done. Of course, it's an outgrowth of the Warren Court, the Miranda decision, and can't remember some of the other cases, but this is an outgrowth of that. But they had to catch him on the street. And again, it shows a weakness for our police departments. This man was arrested for drunk and disorderly, in jail. Somebody paid his $50 fine, he walked out. And it was at least 2 weeks before they could catch him on the street and question him and arrest him.
So he was let loose on a technicality, more or less. I mean, that's what prevented...
Well, no, there was no communication in the police department there. I was quite unhappy about it.
Well, do you think that we've gone too far then in the rights of the criminal against the right to the victim?
There's got to be a balance. The question is, what is more important, law and order or the rights of the individual? Some great guy once said, and I'm going to read this, "Justice is the tolerable accommodation of the conflicting interests of society. The essence of wise civil government lies in the finding of a tolerable balance between liberty and order." And I happen to be one of those people who realize that justice is not perfect, and that we got courts, Supreme Court on down, and of course the conduct of all the courts are set by precedents set by the Supreme Court. These courts are worried about technicalities. Justice Berger himself has said that we need to have fair trials and not perfect trials. But you got some other justices that don't see it that way. I think it's ridiculous that if a policeman sees a man on the street that looks suspicious, let's take the Hoppy murder. A man could have been walking down the street, and if they had no reason to question him, or let's say driving down the street, and if he didn't have a tail light out or did make an illegal turn, they'd have no right to stop him. Unless somebody pointed a finger at him and said, I know that's him. Police officers are frustrated with the rules that they have to live by. But of course, on the other hand, if you didn't have these rules, there'd be a lot of innocent parties that would have to suffer some indignities from time to time.
Well, if you had to choose, I mean, which would you choose? You
Law and
mentioned
order.
Law and order.
Law and order, yes, all the way.
Do you think that, well, what are some of your feelings about law and order that have led to this, leniency toward the criminal and the explosion of violent crime?
Well, the strength of the American Civil Liberties Union, the bleeding heart liberals, some of the flower children, idealists. I'm a practical person, and I just don't. Ideals are like the stars, like the mariner uses stars for a guide. That's the guiding, something to be guided by, and we strive for it. But on the other hand, you got to take a practical approach. It's idealistic not to shoot somebody, but if somebody's advancing on you with a gun to kill you, you say, to hell with idealism, I'm going to protect myself, and you go boom yourself.
Well, you mentioned that the courts and the rulings in the Supreme Court, we see so often that criminals are let loose on matters of technicality. How do you feel about that? I mean, you said something earlier when we were talking about the show that criminals, the bottom line is if you're guilty, you're guilty. If you aren't, you aren't, and let's quit babying them with all these technicalities.
That's right. The fact that you had the illegal search, or the fact that you stopped a car that there was no reason for you to stop the car. And I think it was, can't remember if this case is in Ohio or Indiana, but it's 7, 8 years ago where a robbery had been, an armed robbery had been committed. A lot of money had been taken. The robber's car was spotted by 2 officers, and they pursued him, caught him, searched the car, found the stolen goods in the pocket and the crowbar and all the other burglary tools that they used, and guns, arrested him, convicted him, went to Supreme Court. Supreme Court kicked out the conviction. They had no right to search his car. Now, that isn't right.
No, I agree with you. On the other hand, you mentioned that there has to be a balance, that we have to have some kind of justice system. Our system supposedly is the best in the world. How can we get this balance back? That seems to be what we're talking about, that criminals are treated too leniently as opposed to the rights of the victim.
The people out there got to quit being spectators and start fighting. And they need to demonstrate what their wishes are at the polls. And you got one of these ACLU-endorsed candidates, always vote no on his name, always.
Well, some people would think that this group is fighting for justice too, and I suppose there could be some disagreement there. The thing that intrigues me, though, is your offer of the reward. As far as I know, that's pretty unprecedented. It also goes back to kind of our Western culture, where we see all the cowboy movies and wanted dead or alive, and there's a bounty and bounty hunters and so forth, and it seems that crime itself is a reflection of this Western mentality, that I can be a big man by taking a gun and blowing somebody away. Now you are doing something about it. Has your offer inspired other people in some of the ways that you're talking about?
Shortly after we started offering rewards for different crimes, an organization was formed in Dallas called the Dallas Metro Crime Council. They've signed up members, and then it started out with people who own convenient food stores, service stations, and restaurants. charge $5 fee per store as a monthly membership, and they probably got 600-700 members now. They've been very successful. They have been offering rewards, and they've been conducting a program called Crime Stoppers. That's been effective. They get on television once or twice a week, if I remember correctly, in Dallas, and give the history of a crime that was committed the previous few days, tell the reward, give what leads they have on television, and offer a reward on it. It's been effective too, but we're not keeping pace with the rapid growth of the criminals or the rapid incidents of crime that's happening. Not whatsoever. The police chief there in Dallas 2 years ago said there's no way we're losing ground on them. They're way ahead of us, and after those that we do catch and convict, we can't get them put away long enough to help reduce the amount of crime. And this has been said by many others in the country. We need some unique ideas, something drastic solutions. And one of the first things that ought to happen is execute about 600-700 people that they got on death row in the various states all over the country. I'm surprised. I thought there would be a turn when Nixon had appointed Berger and Blackman, Rehnquist, Powell. Got 4 good conservatives on there. Then Ford turned around and selects this guy Stevens, and I don't give him too much credit. And you got Thurgood Marshall and another one at Brennan, I believe it is. They still are able to delay these executions. I always thought once the Supreme Court denies cert, which means that they will not hear a case and means that the judgment of the last court will stand, I thought that was the finish. That was the end. Unless some liberal governor decided he wanted to commute one of them. But that isn't the way it is. After Supreme Court denies cert, these ACLU lawyers or some other lawyer that's smart enough goes into a district court and says says he got new evidence, or he says he's got he come to find out that the previous lawyer who defended him wasn't qualified, didn't have enough experience. Always some phony deal that delays the execution of these criminals. I really believe that if 400 or 500 of them were executed next week, I believe the murder rate in this country would drop to half what it is. And I'm sure there's some smart guy that's a lot smarter than I am about crime will say, well, prove it. How do you know it will do it? Well, I don't know that it'll do it. I couldn't guarantee it. But let me say this, we've tried every damn thing else and nothing has worked. Let's try that for a while. If it don't work, then we'll do something else. But trial and error, we might find a solution.
It's a rather definitive method of trial and error, but you're right, it might work. What response specifically has your reward offer gotten in the Barbara Hoppe case? Are you getting personal calls from people saying, hey, I got the man for you?
Let me say this. Our offer of reward is based upon the apprehension and indictment, not conviction. Okay. Indictment. And we've got several reasons for doing that. Most people who offer rewards, they want a conviction. In the rewards that we offered and paid off on, the people who informed, they were people who wanted money right now. And I do have a little clout around the courthouse around down there, and if somebody's case to be heard in the grand jury, I can usually get it done pretty quick, and I can get a guy his money, provided we get an indictment. Of course, that don't mean he's going to be convicted and punished. But still, in all, it's a gamble, and I think it's a gamble well worth taking. But in this offer for Barbara Hoppe, and all the offers that we've made in the last 4 or 5 years, we stayed in there to call the Dallas Police Department if you have any information. So I don't get any. However, yes, I did. I did get 7 or 8 calls in this matter. I sure did. And they were all bad leads. And I know in years past we've got a lot of screwball calls. Sometimes they'll call you and won't even give you their name, but they say, I know this guy's been acting strange and he's got to be the one. And, you know, really without any foundation or basis.
They ask you sometimes for just a small portion of it if the lead works out, just for giving you a tip. I mean, you probably do.
No, they want it all. If
Well, how much money have you actually given away in the last 5
I think
years?
we've paid off in the 7 or 8 years. We have paid off. I think it's either 7 or 8 times.
Right?
And some of them, one of them was $10,000, one was $7,500. The rest of them were $5,000 a piece. But we have another cost involved there. The advertising in the paper will always run us about $1,000 to run 3 or 4 days. But we've paid out at least $50,000 somewhere in that area.
It's amazing. Has your offer prompted other businesses or individuals to do the same? Are other people now offering rewards?
Yeah, it's a lot more frequent than it used to be. I'm not saying that we are the ones that led the pack by any means, but when we did start in '73, it hadn't been done around Dallas for many years. And a lot of other people have followed us. I'm real pleased if they aren't.
Has the public response been good to that, or do you get charges that you're grandstanding and just doing it for publicity?
Oh, we've been
respond?
told that, yes, but I can't help it if people find that it does improve our image. I'm glad it does, and there's nothing wrong with a good image. I'm not going to be ashamed of it. But that was not the purpose we started out at. The purpose originally is we're trying to protect our own people. I've got wife and children that I want protected, and grandchildren also. And then you think of other people.
Do you alone make the decision as to what case you're going to offer a reward for, or do you have a committee doing that?
No, I do it. Every once in a while, one of the other people in the company will come in and say we ought to offer a reward, and we do it. I don't make all the I don't make all the decisions, but we have some other people that are responsible, and we want everybody to have some of the action.
I think it's important that people understand that things can be done, and as I said earlier, you are an example of that. You don't have to sit back and say there's nothing we can do. Have you had any direct experience yourself with the judicial system? Have you served on a jury or been arrested or anything like that, where you have a first-hand look?
Yeah, I served on a grand jury 14 years ago, and I think it was one of the most enlightening experiences I ever had. Anyone that doesn't have that opportunity is really missing out on a lot. You really see man at his most magnanimous best, and you see him at his worst. And the people on the street that don't serve on the grand jury just don't get the opportunity to see how bad we can be and how good we can be.
What are some examples? What did you learn from that experience? I think, has anybody in the audience ever served on a jury? Okay, well, maybe we'll get your opinion in a moment. But what did you learn? What were some of the highlights? How did it change your attitude or views about our system?
Well, let me say this. We hope for trying to be idealistic, hope for perfect justice. But I've seen many cases where it's gloomy and dark outside that day, rainy, bad weather, and you see the grand jury's not too good a mood. They throw the book at everybody, and the next day everybody's happy and the sun's shining, and seems like they want to let everybody loose if they didn't commit some heinous crime. But don't forget, the indictment depends on 12 people, and the recommendation of the district attorney recommendation can be turned down, but he's very influential in the grand jury room. So you don't get perfect. They don't come out perfect. I think that in my term, the things that I saw that are not so pleasant to talk about, but I saw cases where black man was assistant DA recommended an indictment, And when he stepped out of the room, I told the other 12 men, I think he's wrong. I think we ought to turn him loose. Justified murder, and we did. And that's what a grand jury is for in the eyes of those 12 people. Should he be indicted or should he be acquitted? And in two different cases, there were black people that I defended and got my wish in the matter. And I think I was right. One case involved a black man who was home recuperating from gunshot wounds that were inflicted by another black man, and he had been hospitalized, and this 3 or 4 months later, and he's sitting on his front porch, minding his own business, and got his protection laying by him, and sure enough, the assailant walks in the gate toward him again. Now, what would you do? I'd figure he's coming to finish the job. He picked up his shotgun and he did it first. So DA wanted to indict him. I said, hell no, I think it's justified murder. And we put him on the ground. And there's some other instances like that. I'm not the only one that would take up defense of somebody, but on the other hand, sometimes DA'd want to turn one loose and we'd say no. But some of the worst things that I saw was grandfather assaulting a little 4-year-old boy. These kind of cases, it just makes you wonder how bad can man be. Cases of homosexual acts that the police department catch these people in public places. I don't know why the homosexuals don't go seek privacy when they want to do their thing. We got those people here with us, and I would like to see I'm kind of like J. Edgar Hoover, who was against victimless crimes being punished and prosecuted. Homosexual do his thing at home in privacy, be all right with me, but I don't think it ought to be in public place, no more would we permit a man and woman fornicating in a public place. But I think they're wasting a lot of damn time prosecuting those people and prosecuting gambling. Not that I don't like to gamble. And prosecuting alcoholics who are drunk, they don't belong in jail, they belong in the hospital. We've talked about so many things, we haven't touched on the problem with dope. Let's talk
about the problem with dope for a minute.
And again, it relates to rewards. Going back previous to the Kefauver days, I don't know if you'd remember, any of y'all were old enough to remember Senator Kefauver. Wasn't he from Tennessee, I believe? Anyhow, he went on a crime-stopping tour of the United States, making an investigation of organized crime. He stopped prostitution, stopped gambling, he stopped a lot of things across the country. But up until that time, the police department, their greatest sources of information were pawn shops, prostitutes, and gamblers. Those people knew who was stealing what. And they worked for the police. Now, they all three in gray areas themselves, but they were the best informers the police had. A good policeman will tell you, and there's some exception to this, there's only 2 ways we solve a crime. Once, we just happen to be there when it happened. 2, somebody tells us. And back in those days, they had a lot of people telling them who did what. Today, they don't have those people. So they've lost their main source of information. Not that I'm advocating prostitution or advocating crooked pawn shop operators or advocating that we have open gambling, but they were a good source of information. They knew what was going on. But now with the advent of dope, you've got a different culture around.
Well, what would you propose to do to pushers if you were in authority to do something? You had a rather unique solution.
Well, we can take the Chinese solution, which I would advocate. If y'all want to elect me king of this country, I'll get it done right quick. But we could get rid of dope pushing right here in Fort Wayne tonight. I'd rather wait till daylight, though.
All right.
We buy 5 burlap bags and 5 wire ties, and we go find 5 pushers, and we put each one of them in a sack, go down to the deep river somewhere, call all the news media in, let them take pictures, we'd throw them in the river, and within hours, all the other pushers would be gone from Fort Wayne. They'd be gone somewhere else. And the users would have to follow them to get rid of them too. Now that would be we know we're not going to accept that kind of solution, but if Chinese got rid of the dope problem that way, and the reason you're not going to accept it in this country, there's too many people in the hierarchy in this country who've got their own sons, daughters, and relatives that have been caught. And they want to cure them, and they want to get them living a straight life again. But I tell you where we're going to go with dope. We're going to do like they do in England, and that is we're going to sell it in a drugstore or some place at a modest price, and we're going to be able to identify the users. The users are not going to have to get out there and rob, kill, and steal to get what they want. It's no worse than alcohol and tobacco. There's 50,000 people die in America every year from use of cigarettes. I don't know how many are dying from use of dope, but you're looking at somebody that's never smoked one marijuana cigarette in their life and not going to. I'm afraid if I might like it as much as I do sex, and I'd just go crazy about it. I don't.
Anybody want to respond to that?
I probably have one cocktail a week. I don't care nothing about it, but this dope is no question about it. It's harmfulness. But if you're going to get rid of it, I think might well get rid of the alcohol and the tobacco too at the same time. You know, we're crazy here in America. We subsidize tobacco grower, and then we got to go subsidize all the hospitals for research and hospitalizing all these people that are sick and can't pay their own way. Don't make sense. But tobacco is very harmful. We know it causes emphysema, it causes heart attacks, it causes cancer.
Some people would say sex is harmful. I think I'll come out in the audience for a while and see if we can get some comments.
You never did tell me how much this job pays.
Anybody want to follow up on anything Mr. Sheps has said? Yes.
I'd like to. I'm very much in favor of the time limit on stays of execution. In fact, PTI has already spoken to Representative Bob Alderman from Fort Wayne here to sponsor it in the House, and Senator Harrison in the Senate. And we had hoped to get it done yet this year, but we have too many other bills going and are running out of time. But this is a project that we will be working on this summer and hopefully bring it before the Indiana legislature next year. We'd like to see a 180-day time limit for stay of execution, just like Jack Howard Potts in Atlanta, Georgia is on his 5th stay of execution. Taxpayer picks this up.
Yeah.
And it's not right. They've had their fair trial. They had their first day of appeal. That is their constitutional right. That should be it.
I agree with you 100%. What do you do at the Supreme Court?
I'd say, well, 180 days after the Supreme
You're
Court
talking
has...
you're talking about legislation at the state level, aren't you?
Yes, and well, we have now formed a national lobby, and we'd like to see this occur across the nation.
Well, I think it's very commendable, and I'd agree with you if you're successful.
We will be.
All that is necessary for all the people to get involved.
Right.
The Supreme Court itself, it will listen.
Right. If enough people scream loud enough, there's no
right.
way they can ignore us. And,
That's exactly right.
And if the people will just voice their opinion, it can be done.
Let me say this is Treva Richard from Protect the Innocent and Betty Spencer from Protect the Innocent. Betty, I'd like to ask you a question. we know of your experience as the survivor of a murderous attack on Valentine's Day 1977. Mr. Sheps talked some about a grand jury and the judicial system, juries, trials. Could you share with us a little bit about your trial and some of the things that you learned? And I imagine it was very difficult for you to sit there and confront these 4 men who murdered your family.
Yes, it was very difficult. Probably one of the most difficult things I've gone through besides the night the boys were killed. One thing I really resented was I had a migraine headache and had had for 4 days when David Smith's trial came up. But I couldn't do anything about it. I had to go ahead and testify when I was scheduled because I would possibly jeopardize a trial if I didn't. Had it been David Smith with the headache, the trial could have been postponed and it would have made no difference. But my headache, I had to be there anyway. And really, for 3.5 hours, I sat there testifying, really almost unable to hold my head up and wondering if I was going to be able to keep my breakfast down. And any of you who have experienced migraines know that this is a terrible thing, and yet I had no choice. And there again, I really complain about the rights of the victim. It's a terrible thing to have to sit in court and confront the person who you saw murder your children and try to kill you. But it's like anything else. Somebody has to do it, so you do it.
What were some of the things that you saw? I'm thinking of one incident that you shared with me this afternoon about how the lawyer for one of the young men, you know, this guy, a completely different look and tone and appearance.
When David Smith came into our house with a shotgun in his hand, he looked like a young man that was ready to kill somebody, and that's exactly what he was. At court, he came in with a short haircut, a little boy haircut. He was a small person anyway, 17 years old at the time. He came in with a flannel shirt and jeans, but it was a little boy's flannel shirt. And he sat with his head down, his hands in his lap, and he wiped his tears from his eyes with the cuff of his shirt. And it was obvious this was an act that he had been coached to do, because this was all he did was sit and look down and wipe his eyes. And this young man, who used the most vile language I have ever heard in my life in our home, was acting like a small child simply to get the sympathy of the jury. Fortunately, it didn't work. Because he would have been a very dangerous person to have put back on the street, because these young men who get away with a crime and get back on the street are immediately heroes to their peers. It's a sad thing, but it's true.
And had the crime not been so obvious, that is, you were an eyewitness, perhaps it would have worked, you know, had the evidence.
Easily, very easily. If I had died, if they'd ever been captured, chances are they would never have been convicted.
Anybody else want to say anything? Mr. Sheps, you want to respond to that from your insights as a grand jury member, the kind of trial system and the way that lawyers can rig things, rig appearances to make them seem other than what they are?
Yes, I think, again, we try for ideal solutions or ideal trials or fair trials. And it isn't fair to the criminal when he's got a court-appointed lawyer who just got out of law school, and he's up against some prosecutor who's had many years of experience. And of course, there's been a lot of murder cases and other kind of cases been reversed because of that. But on the other hand, the shoe can be on the other foot in the same matter. You can have a recent graduate of law school doing the prosecuting and a racehorse Haynes doing the defending. And we've seen what can happen there. In a case down in Texas recently, a man was involved in 2 or 3 murders. Racehorse Haynes, through his cunning presentation of the case to the jury, convinced them that he was not guilty. Then later the man was accused of arranging the murder of a district judge, and again, through his cunningness, the man was found not guilty. There wasn't any equity involved in those trials like that.
I want to tell just a funny story about you, kind of about you over dinner tonight when we were talking about Racehorse Haynes, and we asked Mr. Sheps where they got that name, and he didn't know, and our waitress, who happened to be from Dallas, ended up telling us how Racehorse Haynes got his name. So we thought that was really a welcome for Mr. Sheps coming all the way from Texas.
Oh, Terry, I just wanted to make an observation or a comment. I've just noticed a shift in the mood in the country towards, well, a lot of things, and it seems like criminals and crime in general. I think, and over the last 20 years, our society has gone through a change. In the 60s and 70s, the social sciences were very big. People were looking at society and really examining our society rather carefully. And I think people were more sympathetic to criminals. It was like, well, people don't become criminals in a vacuum. I mean, we're all products of our environment, and there must be something wrong with our environment to produce these kind of people. And I think people were more or less looking at society or their environment and a little less likely to hold people responsible for their own actions. It was sort of like spread the guilt around. I mean, well, because my neighbor is doing this because of partially because what I'm failing to do, for society. But it just seems like people are, becoming less and less tolerant of other people, maybe because of the increase of the crime and maybe because more people feel that they can become victims. It just seems like now we are more interested in having people held accountable and responsible for their own actions, and people are less willing to be a little less tolerant or sympathetic to, no matter how they were raised or where they were raised, you do certain things and you're going to have to accept the consequences, whether that's going to be capital punishment or life imprisonment or whatever.
Thank you for that observation and comment. In the last 10, 15 minutes here, what is the status, Mr. Sheps, of the Barbara Hoppe case that inspired this program, your reward offer? What has happened since September of last year?
They have not had any leads whatsoever of any substance. None whatsoever.
And this involved 2 killers and 2 people. Another
right.
young man besides Barbara was
That's
murdered
correct.
in this case.
The survivor could make positive identification. He's a very observant person, my understanding, and if they ever find him, he'll know him. But where they conducted that crime, I believe that they've done this same thing before. They knew how to tie people up securely where they couldn't get loose, and they did it with calm of real veteran, real pros.
What do you think should be done to them if they are captured? I think I know, but I just want to make sure.
Well, in
if they were
Texas,
convicted.
I would like to fire old Sparky back up. That's the electric chair, but anyhow, our legislature a few years back at the prodding of somebody, got too many lawyers in our legislature down there, and that's a fault everywhere. If you ever have an opportunity to vote against a lawyer and get a practical person, that's what you want to do. Anyhow, our method of execution, and they haven't used it yet, was by injection. I think it's too humane myself.
Well, we've talked now about the perpetuators of crime. I'm going to ask you again, Mrs. Spencer, a question, because I know you're also a member of another group, and I think it would be very helpful for people and families of victims to learn a little bit about this other group that you're part of.
Yes, this is a very special group and unfortunately a very exclusive group. The only way you can become a member is to be a bereaved parent. It's called Compassionate Friends. And it's an organization for people who have had children die, whether it be any way, however they might die. And this is where people share their problems and work them out together. And it's a place where you can freely talk about anything you feel like talking about. We find that the average person really doesn't like to hear about us talk about our dead children. And when I see other mothers bring out pictures of their children and show them off to somebody else. I'd like to bring out pictures of my boys and say, gee, weren't they good looking? But because they're dead, people don't really want to see their pictures. But in this group, we show our pictures and we talk about our kids as they really were, and it's a very helpful thing and a very, very good organization. I believe there is an organization here in Fort Wayne, and the national group is in, headquarters is in Chicago, and it's really a good healer for a bereaved parent, and it's for both men and women. It's not just a women's organization.
Thank you. Do you have weekly meetings, regular meetings, or holidays?
We have monthly meetings, and we cope with the holidays together often. In fact, the Indianapolis group, which is the group that I started going to, has a holiday party right after Christmas. And this seems to be something that helps us cope with the holidays, is because this is something that we can do together. We don't have a big, a real big celebration. It's just a time that we get together and talk about how we feel about the holidays and have a little special meal together. And nobody wants to celebrate Christmas with their family and have somebody come in and start talking about dead people, but we would like to talk about our children once in a while. So this is the time we can do it.
How could people join this group?
All you have to do is go to a meeting. There's no formal membership, and you can go as long as you want to. Normally people go, and then when they start feeling better, they stick around and help the new ones that come in that are having problems. And it's a really good self-help group.
Do you now, when you read about another victim of a horrible crime, do you sometimes write them letters or call them and let them know there's such a group? And did people do that to you? We talked about in the first show about some of the nasty things that you got.
I guess I didn't talk about the good things that happened. I have a large sack, garbage sack, full of mail from all over the United States, and many of them were other people whose children had died in different ways, and particularly from people whose children had been murdered. There are a lot of people just well-wishing. There were books sent to me. Sometimes when I'm blue and kind of down on the world, I go back and read those little notes, and each time I find something new and more encouraging. But yes, I do contact people whose children die, whether it be through murder or any way, and I often go to the funeral home. Now that it's been a little longer, I find that I can do this often, not every time. I have to be in the right mood because it's very hard for me to stay strong in the funeral home, and of course I always fall apart in the parking lot when I get out. But to benefit the parent, I must stay strong at that time. But that it helps other parents to know that I have survived all of this, and they kind of take this attitude: if she can do it, I can too. And if I can give someone strength this way, that makes me feel better, makes me feel more worthwhile.
Thank you. Treva, is there any undertaking on the part of Protect the Innocent to join forces with, so to speak, with the Compassionate Friends group?
Not at this point, Terry. It has never been brought up. Our group is really concentrating more on the judicial system and that type of thing. And I think, like Betty Jane said, this type of group can be more effective by actually being the victims, and helping each other than what we could, not having experienced this, because the majority of our people are not victims of crime. Our lobby group is, but the rest of us are just potential victims of crime and trying to prevent more victims of crime.
Thank you. Mr. Sheps, let's talk a little bit about the comment that Rena in the back made. You've seen, I suppose, a lot of changes in the last 10, 20 years. She mentioned the not caring as much for one another. We know we're a transitional society. We move around a lot. We have a high divorce rate. You've mentioned alcohol and drugs. What do you see happening in our country that is contributing to this explosion of violent crime?
I would think of the main cause for the explosion of crime is a breakdown in the family institution. I need to go back to refer back to Ariel and whatever their names were who wrote the books on civilization. There was a time in my life I thought that the child born today was smarter than the child born 6,000 years ago. But I finally got smart, or think I'm smart anyhow. The facts are that the little barbarian that's born today is just as uncivilized as a child born 10,000 years ago. And it is up to the parents to heap a little civilization on that little fella every day, and then get help from the church, from the schools, and someday, maybe when he's 20 years old or close to it, you can set him outside on the street, and he'll be civilized, and he'll respect other people. He'll respect parents first, his teachers, people on the street. He'll respect their lives, their property, and their rights. Now, we still carry around with us all the days of our life that characteristic they call atavism. We're apt to go back to our original state at any time. Some of us don't ever go back to the original state, but the property or the characteristic is there. And to prove a point, when somebody who's been led a good, clean life for 40 years, 50 years, and all of a sudden he gets mad at somebody and pulls a gun and kills them, not in the case of self-defense, but from anger, he's lost all his civilization that's been heaped upon him and that he's learned and practiced all his life, and he's gone back to his original state. In our original state, we are barbarians. And if we don't have parents to teach the children and imbue in them discipline, we're not going to have children that are going to go out there and respect other people. How are you going to break this cycle now? I don't know. But we do have a problem. Don't forget, poverty begets poverty, and ignorance begets ignorance, and on down the line. We got a very serious problem. How are you going to break that cycle and get people back being civilized and respecting one another's lives and their rights and property?
Well, when we talk about civilization, that is often used as a reason for disagreeing with the capital punishment. That means we are not civilized. We reduce ourselves to the level of the killers, etc. How do you feel about that argument?
You know, I'm of the Jewish faith, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, so I'm going to be uncivilized when it's necessary.
Well, there are those who say that when we do that, when we take another life in a legal way, the state takes it, that is contributing to the violence, not stopping it. Now, what do you say to people like that?
I don't see it that way. I know when we had our electric chairs working, we had a lot less crime.
Yes.
Many people do say that when the state takes a life, that they are committing a murder. But these people have not looked it up in the dictionary, apparently, because Webster defines to kill is to deprive of life, and murder the crime of unlawfully killing a person. And it is the lawful right of the state to electrocute someone. So the state is not committing murders. And God gave the authority to the government to carry out civil law years ago. So this is not murder, although some people try to put a guilt trip on the rest of us by saying this to us, and a lot of people will buy it, but I'm not about to.
Thank you. While we're talking, Mr. Sheps mentioned, and it's been mentioned in the show, about the family, that the parents must heap this civilization on the barbarian, and I think that's a good point, actually. How were the boys or men or people that did the horrible thing to your family, what kind of family is, from what you know of them, did they come from?
This is all hearsay, but it came from law officials, so I assume that it is the truth. Only one of them had both a father and mother to take care of them. The rest of them had very bad home lives. The leader of the gang had a father and a mother, a too loving father, a father that thought anything he did was perfect and that he should not be held accountable for any of his actions. And it's been told to me, I don't know how reliable the story is, but I've been told that Roger Drollinger came home from school with a lunch pail that belonged to someone else in first grade. And his mother said, "Oh, Roger, you're going to have to take this back to school and give it to who it belongs to." And his father said, if he wants that lunch pail, he can have it. And that was the start of Roger Drollinger's criminal career. And he has a very long list of crimes that he has been apprehended for. How many he has not been apprehended on. It's like Steve Goldsmith says, a prosecutor of Marion County. He says a person who is up for a habitual criminal, which means they've been arrested 3 times, that means they have committed probably 100 crimes but have only been caught 3 times. So, but yes, I think the deterioration of the family is a problem. And I don't know how you force people to become parents. But whatever the answer is, we'd better be finding it pretty soon, I think.
Mr. Sheps mentioned the bleeding liberals. I ask either of you, they would say that these people should be rehabilitated or the attempt should be made. Do you think they should even have the opportunity? Mr. Sheps?
Well, I've heard psychiatrists say that once the little fellow's got beyond 6, 7 years old, his character's made up. No one's going to change him. And, of course, who am I to question them? But there's a serious problem present. We had a lot better world to live in when the days when parents were parents and people understood what it was to respect others, people's lives and their property, and there was discipline. You saw a policeman, you respected him, you didn't call him pig. It's a desperate situation, and we got to find some desperate solutions. Whether right or wrong, we're not doing anything now. The federal government come up with our LEAA deal back in the days of Johnson. I think it was a total waste. We got police officers that are accustomed to 40-hour weeks, detectives that are working hot on a murder cases, and 40 hours up, they go home. That isn't the way to solve crimes. Years ago, you had dedicated policemen who were hot on the tail of a criminal, and he didn't stop until he found him.
Well, Mr. Harmon Sheps, coming all the way from Dallas, Texas, I want to thank you so much for joining us, for sharing with us your views. I want to commend you for your reward offers and hope that they continue to do some good and be part of the solution that you're talking about. I also want to thank again the family of Barbara Hoppe for their help in making this program possible, and hope that Theater for Ideas series on victims, a difficult subject and a painful one, but we've had people willing to share with us their views. So I thank you all, Mr. Sheps. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here.
Barbara Hoppe was a beautiful young woman with deep, brooding eyes, an impish sense of humor, and a loving family. She had lots of friends, too, but it wasn't until near the end of her short life that she began to feel really comfortable with herself. Barbara had a hard time feeling she was attractive. As a child, she had to wear a cumbersome back brace. Perhaps it was this that caused her insecurity, her feelings that she wasn't pretty. But oh, she was pretty. As she entered high school, she shed the back brace and blossomed into a beautiful young woman. But she wasn't much different, I suppose, from other kids her age. There were the parties and the books, the '65 Ford Mustang she came to love. She went to IU Purdue here in Fort Wayne and then met a man at Notre Dame. In 1977, she married him and moved to the big city, Dallas, where she worked at American General Life Insurance and then at Frito-Lay. She got divorced and made lots of friends. One of her favorite things was taking pictures of her friends. As her mother said, it got so you started to hide when you saw her coming because you knew she was going to get a picture of you. A lot of pictures, a lot of friends, and many of them she sent home to her family. the pictures, that is. She wanted them to know her friends and her world. She wrote home regularly and called often. As is true of all good parents, Barbara's missed her as much as she missed them, and would have liked to have had her back home. But it was her life, they knew, and she must be free to live it. She was happy in Dallas, adjusting well to her life as a single woman, and that's what counts. Last summer she came home to visit, triumphant in her western jeans, boots, and cowboy hat. She posed in the same step with her dog where just a few years ago she had posed in her high school graduation gown. The change from cap and gown to jeans and cowboy hat was apparent. The interchanges, of course, were not so apparent, but it seems clear that Barbara was maturing into a cautious, beautiful, independent young woman with plans and fears and dreams, not unlike many women her age. On September 11th of last year, she went over to two new friends' apartment, a 5-minute drive from her own, to watch a professional football game, a ritual in Dallas. She hadn't been there long. There is no need to go into details. On that warm, late summer night, she was murdered. Barbara Hoppe was a victim of a society whose sickness cannot be comprehended. We all feel, as did her family and friends, that this type of injustice could never touch our own lives. We read about it in the papers. We talk with horror about it in our daily conversations. But we can't feel it, not really. If we were to respond to Barbara as our sister or our daughter, the shock would be too harsh, and we might realize that, yes, we are potential victims because Barbara Hoppe was a victim. There was no logic in the events that led to her death, and so it could be for one of us. And if we are willing to share in the pain that the survivors are left to feel, perhaps we could overcome a small fraction of the alienation and apathy that often allows for the murder of a fellow human being. If we would allow for our anger to surface, perhaps we could collectively prevent that sickness in our society from growing. But even if we couldn't accomplish that, we could at least offer our hearts to those who must suffer the pain and anguish of a loss too powerful to ever comprehend. Victims are too often forgotten. If we can forget the victims, we can forget that we too are victims, until the moment it enters our lives as unexpectedly as it did theirs. Caring about Barbara Hoppe is caring about ourselves, and caring about ourselves will bring us together in the common pursuit of a less cruel existence.